Welcome back to the Avenue Podcast, where we're passionate about unleashing your God-given potential through the life-transforming power of the gospel. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Matt.
And today we're going to be talking about the idea of worship and what it means to lead worship and also our journeys through worship as well. So, yeah, really keen to get into this one, Matt.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, Nathan and I are both, kind of like the worship leaders of Avenue. So, yeah, it's something we're really passionate about. And, yeah, I'm going to start off by saying, what is worship? What is worship to you, Nathan? What does it mean? How would you define?
Yeah, I feel like worship's something that's changed over the years for me. It's been something that, I would exclusively relate to something like music, but I see it now more as daily life. Someone said that, worship is the same word as work, even in the original text. So, that really changes my perspective to see things as, man, everything could be worship. It's just the way that we present ourselves in that situation. So, yeah, that's what worship has kind of meant for me over the years and kind of where I am with it now. And though I lead people in worship mostly through music, I hope that, I can also do a good job of doing that outside of music as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. How about you? Do you have any thoughts on what the Bible says?
When we define the word in English, worship, it can be rooted back to the were comes from worth. So I feel like it's at its core, worship is expressing worth to something. So that we can worship things that aren't God. We can worship heaps of things in our lives. For example, I don't know, we worship our phones by the amount of time that we spend on them. Something that I've talked a lot about in this podcast, probably in previous iterations of this podcast. We also worship celebrities. There's literally a thing called celebrity worship syndrome.
Really?
So people become obsessed with celebrities and worship them to a point where it's unhealthy. And I think that it shows that we can really idolize and worship things that aren't God. And I think it's really important to know what worship is to be able to become a better worshiper. I think that's the first step.
Yeah.
Knowing what is worship. Because, as you said, it's not exclusively music.
That's
right. We are brought up in the church and we are told, this is worship music. This is a worship band. This is worship, you're on worship today. But worship is more than just, the music that we play in church. It's so much more. It has to be an everyday expression as Christians, as followers of Christ, to worship, because that was what Jesus did every day. He would worship God, and I think that you don't really see Jesus singing much, he's not singing Phil Wickham songs or hymns as much as he is actually out in the community, actively
absolutely.
Being a worshiper and witnessing to others.
Yeah, that's really good. So, if you think about it, how much time do we actually spend in song throughout the week? Nowhere near compared to the amount that we spend at work. You work 40 hours a week full time if you do, and you go to church for, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3
hours.
if you go to prayer and praise,
Every Wednesday, by the way.
Wednesday,
Every Wednesday.
So surely worship has to be more than just our time at church or our time in a space where we're meant to be actively worshiping.
And I think that we need to recognize that. And I do think it's hard as well, as both you and I are worship leaders, and Nathan, I'm sure you've got this a lot. You've just played at a service, someone comes up to you and is like, you did really well, you worshipped great today. And how do you feel about that kind of sentiment?
Feels good.
It feels good.
It
does.
Good.
We as humans, we like words of affirmation. We like compliments.
No, I relate to that. Just the weekend past, I played at a church that I don't really often play at anymore, and it was a Christmas service. So there was a fair bit of practices that went into it, and I feel it's one of the better times I've probably played piano than I usually do. and I got like a lot of like affirmations about it.
Mm.
And then I can't lie, on the way home I was like listening to my own recordings about like myself playing, almost like worshipping myself through that, and like kind of felt like a little bit guilty about that, and that's not what worship is meant to be. And that's the task from the worship leader, where like, what I would say to people when they compliment me is like, oh, it's just like a lot of practice, and like, yeah, it's all for God and all that sort of thing. But in reality, like,
we do
enjoy the affirmation.
The affirmation. And I think that it's one of the main tensions as a worship leader in a church is this tension of, we are playing music and we want it to sound good. We want to make a joyful noise to the Lord. We want it to be as good as we can possibly make it.
Yeah,
like
excellent.
A good sacrifice, right? Like, we want, we don't want to just like do it half baked. Yeah. But then we get to a point where it's like, people will come up and say, great job. And it does feel great. And so I wonder, I think it's the same with celebrities and same with idolatry. It's everything that's not God is going to fall short. Yeah. Right? Everything that's not God is going to fall short of his glory. Yeah. He is the perfect being. And that includes us as worship leaders. And I think that we need to be careful as worship leaders and as people who, lead others into worship. We need to be worshipping an audience of one. It's not worshipping ourselves. It's not self-seeking. It should be worshipping God first and only.
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to cycle back to what you said about the word worthy. And like, I guess when we worship, we have to ask ourselves, what is worthy of our worship right now? And as you said, the audience of one, that is the only one who is really worthy of our worship. Because we can worship so many other things. We can claim other things as worthy. We can claim, like you said, our phones as worthy, ourselves as worthy, a hobby that we're really into, that's worthy of our worship, that's worthy of our time. There's nothing wrong with enjoying those things. There's nothing wrong with being happy when someone compliments you. Like, that's normal human response. And I think God wants us to experience like, an uplifting feeling when you're affirmed. But like, at the end of the day, true worship in its purest form, only God is worthy of our worship. And we decide on who is worthy through who we devote our time to.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've just got this this psalm, and then we can get more into like our personal journeys with worship maybe.
Yeah.
But so Psalm 63, O God, you are my God. I earnestly search for you. My soul thirsts for you. My whole body longs for you in this parched and weary land where there is no water. I've seen you in your sanctuary and gazed upon your power and glory. Your unfailing love is better than life itself. How I praise you. I will praise you as long as I live, lifting up my hands to you in prayer. You satisfy me more than the richest feast. I will praise you with songs of joy. I lie awake thinking of you, meditating on you through the night. Because you are my helper, I sing for joy in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you. Your strong right hand holds me securely. And I just really love that imagery in that psalm. I think that, it does talk about singing, and obviously we love singing. We love worshiping God through music. But it also talks about, meditating through the night, meditating and praying. And I think those are other elements of other expressions of worship that can be overlooked when we just say, this is the worship band.
Yeah.
And I've heard of churches that don't allow the worship leaders to, say stuff in between songs or pray. And I think that that's just like not what worship leading is about, because worship leading, you're leading people to worship God. And I get that it can sometimes, when people speak, maybe it can be self-seeking in itself, but to facilitate a place of worship, a holy, sanctified place, I think that you do need to have that prayer, that communication with God, and speak about what is going on, like that you're sensing the Holy Spirit is speaking as a worship leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're a worship leader who can sing up the front and even pray up the front, but not have your own prayer life and not have your own worship life, then what are you leading from, you know?
Yeah.
You're leading from a place of yourself and what you want to present yourself to look like.
Yeah.
And I know I'm really guilty of that sometimes. Like sometimes at prayer and praise, like I could be, you know, feeling really like inspired to like speak throughout that and share and lead other people into worship. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at those times, sometimes like my own prayer life is not the best, you know? And not saying that's like absolutely hypocritical, because in those moments I do feel like inclined to lead people into worship.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you have no desire to pray in your own life, then that makes it really almost conflicting when you do lead in front of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, we need to be worshippers first, and worship leaders not first. Like we're not just leading worship.
Exactly.
Like we need to actually worship
Yes.
and practice that throughout our lives.
Yeah, so you got to be a worship per over worship leading.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure. I like
100%.
that.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, right. So, tell me about your introductions to like worship, maybe in a more church vibe setting. Like, what did that look like for you when you were younger? What does it look like for you now?
Yeah, I started singing at church a long time ago. I think I was probably 11 or 12.
Oh, wow. Start 'em young.
Yeah, yeah. My church, it was pretty relaxed. Like there was no,
that's good.
yeah, I wasn't a good singer back then, I don't think. And I mean, I was in one musical production back in the day when I was in year 6. Yeah,
Nice.
Beauty and the Beast. So,
okay. Yeah. Was that your peak?
That was that was my peak.
Peaked
yeah,
too
for
early.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, I think that like I've been part of worship bands for a long time, and yeah, it's my perception of worship and my presence as a worshiper. It has changed so much throughout my life. Like definitely growing up, there was like worship band and worship at church was, I just kind of thought of it as songs, as we kind of mentioned before. And and I think that, when you're young, that's just kind of what you see is, But then I think I reached a point where, I started to see past just the music itself and really got to a point of, trying to, implement more of that in my own life. And I think that started more in COVID, actually, with my formation. I was doing like a formation course. And so, it was interesting. A year of formation, I think, in COVID was interesting, like 2020. And so, I really did change in that time. And definitely over that year, my perception of worship changed to less about, the big stage, the big crowd, and more towards the audience of one, which we've talked about. And a lot of that was also, I read this book about, called The Reset, and how we need to reset the culture of worship in our church, because it is so, he compares it to, the temple in, we talked about this in another podcast that we did, where Jesus goes into the temple and is so upset by the markets that have been set up and the people that are scamming, the Jewish people, that are going to the temple to worship. And I think that that's a really, a good image to think of, like, what have we turned worship into? What do you think of that?
No, that's really good. And I think, that image of like Jesus turning the tables, that's like the image of reset, right? Like people in that temple were, again, worthy of their time, worthy of their sacrifice. Their worship was to the marketing and to making money and turning it into a business, right? But Jesus calls us back to the house of worship, and that's what the reset's about.
Mm.
That's what it means to me, and I really relate with that. And I think what you mentioned throughout lockdown as well, I think that was definitely a period in time in my life as well where, like, you really were forced to reshape your idea of worship because you couldn't go to a church and physically do that regular expression that you knew of. You had to think of differently, like, you know, listening to things on Zoom was like so bad that like you had to have a personal worship life in order to feel like you were worshiping.
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure.
You can sing over Zoom. It was really
It had to be deeper than just the the music itself.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And I think when we think of, that kind of idea, I think of Heart of Worship as the song.
And that's a song that we love, like, playing.
Yeah.
Probably our most played song.
Yeah, like just coming back to the heart of worship, like what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's about Jesus. It's not about anything else. And we need to be sorry that what we've turned worship into, and we need to realize that we need to change it. Like we need to reset the culture of worship in our church. And
No, I feel that. Yeah. I guess personally had a pretty similar journey. Like started playing music pretty young. Definitely had opportunities in school and in church as well. Where I probably played more. I played a range of different instruments. Even started playing the bass guitar. I think the first time I played at school was playing bass guitar.
Nice.
Which is, I was like this tall, and the bass guitar was like this long, and I looked so tiny with the bass guitar. And I was only forced to do that because the other bass guitarist stopped playing bass, so that was a bit rough. And then, eventually found myself playing piano more at church, and that's probably been my like main instrument, and the one that I probably feel most confident with. But for me, playing piano at church, at school, was really good. But like we were kind of talking about before, like the affirmation for yourself, that was how I thought I knew I was doing a good job with my worship, was when other people told me that I was doing good, or someone else told me that I played piano well. In my mind, that meant I was like, that it was the equivalent of being a good worshipper for me, because worship was purely public. But that really kind of reshaped things as I got older, and like I don't regret like my attitude towards worship when I was a kid either. I think that was like really pure and really good, and still really like almost still healthy, like in the sense that, like I didn't know better, like that's just what I thought it was. And like I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but going through lockdown, I actually found it pretty challenging, to be honest, going back to this whole idea of resetting and thinking of like what worship is when you take the stage away. And it conflicted me a lot because it developed this urge to seek more intimate worship, which traditionally I would be a bit more uncomfortable with. And to be honest, I found myself conflicted thinking, does worship have to look like, this way, or does it look like what I grew up knowing in my Adventist upbringing, where it was more, let's say, traditional in that sense. Not even just traditional in music, but traditional in the fact that it's mostly in that program. And for a while, I was kind of actually just turned off by worshipping in a music setting, and in terms of worship leading, I kind of didn't really know where in my heart I sat with it. And that kind of really challenged me to, just like really put a barrier between me and God. And I guess coming out of that, probably in 2022 sort of thing, I found a bit more of a healthy middle ground. And I want to say that was like really found through things like working with you as well in prayer and praise, and also having like other people journey with you in worship makes things so much better. So I appreciate you so much in that journey, because like yeah, I don't know where my worship life would be if it wasn't for being able to lead with you and doing all that sort of thing. So this is the part we start crying and
Yeah. Oh, thanks, man. Love you.
No problem. Yeah, but yeah, it's like sharing because worship is so broad, even in the
Yeah.
music space. Like there are people who say are very charismatic in their worship. There are people who are very reserved and contemplative in their worship. And neither is necessarily wrong or right, but finding someone that you've almost vibe with in that worship spectrum is really helpful
Yeah.
for like getting you to where you need to be with God. So I found that really valuable working with you to sort of, journey with someone and have those chats and discussions with.
Yeah. And I think that, we've played together so much now that it's like Nathan and I can show up, like, and I'm not trying to like boast through this, like we can show up to like a prayer and praise and play songs that, we've played, and just like we have I feel like we are always on the same wavelength.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I feel like that's really the spirit as well. Like I think that is God, both putting us together, but also helping us, decide what is like ready, like people are ready for in the moment.
Yeah, and I don't even see that as laziness anymore, to be honest. Like, just showing up and playing with you. Because, like, first of all, it's not complacent because I feel like we've done it, like, so much together. But also, there's sometimes where, like, me and you just have worship sessions together.
Yeah.
And, like, we just do, like, some songwriting or we just sing some worship songs.
Yeah.
And sometimes we feel the Spirit more than others in that space.
Yeah.
But, like, that, once again, leading from your individual private life then allows you to express more in your worship leading.
100%. Yeah, we can't stress that enough. Like, it's about how you are formed outside of just the church space and the worship space.
Yeah.
As much as it is in them. I think, spiritual formation is something that's really important to me, and I think a key part of it is that it's also not for your sake, but for the sake of others. Like when you are formed in Christ, it actually overflows from your individual and it can go out, but you do have to like, it's kind of countercultural. Like it is like you have to focus on yourself and, make yourself more like Christ, but through making yourself more like Christ, through your worship and through, praying and through seeking God's face, that's when the others around you can just soak that in. Like they can see it. Like there's something different about a Christ follower versus a Christian, I think. Like
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's probably Christians get a bad rap because there's so many Christians or like Christians but if we were all to actually like follow Christ with all our hearts, like what would that look like in the church, do you think? Like, I don't know. I feel like it would be a very, very different world to live in.
Oh, definitely. I think, I even heard this from an author saying, like, don't call me a Christian anymore. Call me a Christ follower.
Yeah.
And, actually taking up your cross daily and following Christ and bringing that into the church setting, how much more missional would we be as a community? And, worship is usually considered to be this more vertical response where it's between me and between God. But out from that, which is where we find our Christ following, comes the outward expression. So I feel like, if we were, as a church, more intentional about being more Christ following, that inward expression becomes expressed through our outward connections.
Yes.
Through the way that we interact with others, through the way that we evangelize to other people.
Yeah.
And people will see that because of the love that we have through our relationship with God.
Yeah. And I think there is something so different about authentic, like, worship that's just like, so, like, someone so on fire for God and just like completely in their own moment, like just in that headspace, like with God, like in the presence of God. And I think that when you see that, like, it is inspiring. Like you can see like worshipers who are really just focused solely on that audience of one, and that is more inspiring than maybe like someone who's trying to hit all the runs, or sing, or like hit all the notes, do all the cool stuff. And we're all guilty of it. Like like we are musicians after all. But like I don't know. There's something different in the authenticity of like a true worshiper.
Yeah.
I meant like someone who's after God's own heart, like David.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And in a more practical sense, like I see that so much through the way that like almost like we work together as well. And when like maybe I would suggest being more of the music director type, saying, oh, maybe we should implement, add this instrument to get this sound, and to like kind of build on the music. And sometimes Matt would have to remind me, just be like, not necessarily like tell me I'm wrong for suggesting that, but just remind me and saying like, let's remember that we're trying to keep it more about God rather than about our music. And there's nothing wrong with adding more instruments to your band. There's nothing wrong with trying to get cool music out of it. Like
100%.
But it's so helpful when you have other people to ground you and say like, hey, let's recenter and let's focus on that first, and then the rest will follow from that.
100%.
So I found that a lot through the way that we're able to work together and like work with each other. So
Do you want to talk about the future of our worship? Like what does it look like for us?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, it's a lot to sort of think about. On a personal note, I would like to express this culture of worship more in our church. I want Avenue to be a worshipping community. I wanted it to be a community of worshippers. And I think that's almost the purpose of Prayer and Praise. Like that's what we're trying to do, create this culture of worship within our community. So I think that's like a big vision of mine. And then expanding on that, I would like to see my denomination be more of a worshipping denomination. I'd like to see the Adventist Church be more expressive in their worship. I'd like to see them be more enthusiastic about their worship as well, which is something I really struggled with growing up as a kid, and has really shaped me and changed the way I see things now. And I think through Avenue, I think we can almost be a beacon of light towards the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one you bring up. And I always make this joke, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I feel like Adventists, they're really great with their hands in terms of like building.
Practical stuff.
Yeah, practical. Yeah, like you see like, I don't know, Nuttawading, like the new like retire. It looks great. They're great at building stuff.
Yeah, great at visioneering, like, building stuff,
Yeah, the hands-on stuff. But they're not great with their hands in worship. Like I always say this.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah. And I think that like before like we get into any debates about like what is I just want to say like in the Bible like praise is like in Hebrew it's represented by
hands. Yard.
Hands. Yard or yada is yada, praise and yard is hands.
Yeah.
So it's like so inherently like linked in, and you saw it in that psalm that I read before. Like he talked about raising his hands, and I think that it's a great like if you are ever stuck in like I just am not like feeling like worshiping right now, whether that you're listening to music or just in your own like raising your hands to God is a sign of surrender. It's a sign of just letting go of the things that you're holding on to. And so I think it's a really powerful thing that we can do, which I don't see a lot across the Adventist. And look, maybe your church, if you are listening from somewhere else, like I've seen some churches there's a spectrum.
Yeah,
and
spectrum and everything. Yeah. And I think within our denomination, we're very blessed to have very logically inclined people. I've met a lot of very like level-headed Adventist people, which I really love, and I really like have a lot of love for people like in that sort of boat. And I think like even things like hand raising, that's a logical thing. Like it doesn't have to be an emotional response. I think we often see it as this thing like when I'm feeling the worship, I raise my hands. But it's actually more of a logical choice when it's saying like, I don't even feel like raising my hands, but I will anyway because I'm surrendering to God, and that's a sign of surrender. Yeah. If you think about surrendering in battle, you raise your hands. I'm done.
Yeah.
We were talking about like what paintball before. Like when you're trying to do like a free walk, you walk with your hands up. That's like a show of like you know what, I'm surrendering there.
Yeah.
And in the same sense, like, that's a logical decision in worship as well. I'm going to raise my hands to show that, you know, I'm worshipping Jesus and he is worthy of my worship.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we are trying to build that culture in Avenue, I think, of worshippers who, worship with their whole self, not just, you know, inside or not just outside, but people who come to God as they are, as worshippers, and just give themselves to him. I think that's sums up what we want as in prayer and praise every week.
Yeah.
And at Intersections, we just want people to step closer to God.
Yeah. And just like what you said about hands, even like when you're saying that, even like Adventists are great with their hands in practicality. And that is worship as well.
Yeah.
Like building church buildings. That's part of worship. That's commitment. That's like
Exactly.
setting up sound equipment, setting up, you know, even hosting pathways and using your hands to like help build things and help, help prepare food even. That's all part of what worship is. So hands is so related to worship because it's in everything that we do.
Yeah, it is.
So, and our vision for this community is that people use their hands both upwards, but also laying their hands down to help on the ground as well. And this is, there's a verse in Amos that talks about this, where people in that community were not being active in putting their hands down and helping other people, and they were more active in their worship services and in their ceremonies to show that they were good worshippers. But Jesus or God actually condemns that, saying that you guys weren't putting your hand down to help others. So in our community, I guess we want to focus on help and lead other people to put a hand up, but also put a hand down.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great image.
Yeah.
Put a hand up and put a hand down.
Yep. Just like that.
Just like that. Just like that. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. If you guys have any like questions, like Nathan and I are always free to answer them. And if you want to get involved with, any part of Avenue,
always looking for more worship leaders.
Yeah, always looking for more people to help out in worship. And you know, whether that's, you know, praying, like we did a series in Prayer and Praise last year called Expressions of Worship, where we did, you know, 5 weeks of different ways that you can worship. And you know, there's heaps. There's poetry, there's art, there's songs, there's fasting, there's building. Like, if you want to get involved in that, I'm sure we can find something for you. Like,
I know a guy.
yeah, we know some people for sure. So I really encourage you guys, if you're watching this right now and feeling like a strong inkling to reach out, please do.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Matt. It's been a really nice time chatting about worship.
Yeah.
As we've been chatting, there's been so many like topics that come to my head, like, we could have so many discussions about so many other things.
Yeah.
But thanks for joining us in the Avenue podcast, guys. Join us next time as we go throughout this New Year season.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.